Do you ever feel that, you can't really advocate for yourself when you're on the job, or maybe you're interviewing for a job and you worry that you don't have enough experience, or that, there are other candidates that know things that you don't, or you didn't go to the right school or have the right degree or an expensive enough school? Well, in this video series, I really want to talk about where this feeling comes from and what we can do about it. Over the course of many years of helping people negotiate job offers and learning how to interview better and how to advocate for themselves on the job and learning these skills myself, I have found that there's one problem that keeps coming up over and over again, and there's two different versions of it. Now, the first is what I call but I don't syndrome. This is when you look at a job and a prospective position and it has job requirements and it says, well, you need an MBA or you need 3 to 5 years experience, and you think, but I don't have an MBA, or but I don't have 3 to 5 years experience, I only have 1 year of experience, and because of that you feel like, I shouldn't even apply for this job. Now, I'm not gonna tell you that no matter what the job says or what the requirements are, you should apply to any job and you can get it. But what I will say is there seem to be two types of people. The first group of people believes that you get a job and then you rise to the occasion and you learn on the job. So they look at requirements and look at them more like suggestions. The second group of people look at requirements as things that you have to have. So you go around and you gather experience and you gather skill sets, and once you have all the things that are required, then you apply for the position and you try to get it. So that's the first version of the syndrome. The second version is what's called imposter syndrome, and this is really well documented. This is when you're actually on the job and you feel like if everybody knew, if they really knew you, if they really knew what you're capable of and your skill sets, they would realize that you're just winging it and you're just learning as you go, and you don't really feel like you belong there. You feel like you're an imposter. And if anybody knew about that, they might just fire you on the spot. That is what is called imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is really, really, really common, and that is one of the things to realize, that almost everybody suffers from one of these two or both of them at some point, and some of us suffer from this constantly. Now, I'm gonna give you a couple examples in my life of personal stories where I was either experiencing both the but I don't syndrome or the imposter syndrome. For me personally, I tend to not suffer as much from the but I don't syndrome, but I really, really suffer from imposter syndrome, and acknowledging that, differentiating between the two, and then acknowledging that this is a thing that I have to deal with has been really, really important in getting me past it. Now, the first story is when I was actually in college and I was an intern at Microsoft. I was working in the tech industry, and I wanted to come back as a full-time employee at Microsoft in the Windows security group, which meant you had to know a lot about computer security, something that I actually knew very little to nothing about. And so I found out there was one graduate course in my college on computer security. So I emailed the professor and said, hey, I'd love to take your course in the fall. But he emailed me back and he was like, you're not a computer science student and you have no background in computer security at all, so you really can't take this graduate level course. So I emailed him, I was like, I will read whatever books you want me to read over the summer and I can kind of get ready. And he's like, absolutely nothing doing, this course is just not for you, I'm sorry. So I didn't listen to him. I bought the course book and I started reading it over the summer, and then when fall came around and I was back in school, I actually just slipped into the class and sat in the class for the first month answering all the questions because I'd already read the book. Now, eventually, when the first project assignment came out, I had to go up to him and very sheepishly say, hey, remember that guy who emailed you over the summer? That's me, and I'd really like to stay in the course. And he had some internal conflict, but eventually he let me stay in the course. And because I was in that course, I did really well in my interviews and I got the job at Microsoft. And this is just a great example of where I could have said, hey, I don't have those requirements. I don't have the things that is required for me to be in the course or to be in that job or to apply for that job. But because I didn't actually say no to myself, I kind of persevered. And this is, an example of I don't actually have that syndrome. But I will tell you, when I got on the job, I had incredible amounts of imposter syndrome because I really felt like I didn't belong and I had kind of hoodwinked my way into it. Now, as you can see there, I don't suffer that much from the but I don't have enough experience syndrome, but I do suffer a lot from the imposter syndrome. And you can imagine once I got on the job, I experienced that a lot. I really felt like, man, I don't really belong here. And I had to grapple with that for a long time. It took a long time for me to come to terms with my imposter syndrome. It was about 8 or 9 years later when I got my first job actually in San Francisco, and it was my first time managing people, and I ended up managing people that were older than me, and I really felt like, oh man, I don't know if I belong. And my boss he had just graduated from Harvard Business School, and in some ways I felt like, man, I didn't go to business school. There were things that I don't know, and maybe people are gonna find out that I don't know them. Really strong imposter syndrome. One day my boss comes to me and says, hey, you need to come up with a financial projection for next year for your team. And I thought, a financial projection? God, I have no idea what that is. Like, I've heard that term before. I know people make financial projections in a spreadsheet, but I have no idea how to do it. So I spent 2 weeks just every night trying to read online and figure out what is it, how do I do this financial projection? I created this really complicated spreadsheet and it was completely wrong. And finally my boss came to me and he's like, look, it's been 2 weeks. How come you haven't given me the financial projection for your team? And so I showed him what I had, and he looked at it and he's like, this is way, way too complicated. And he just started putting in numbers and guesses and really very simply created a financial model, which now I understand is actually a much simpler thing to do than I thought. But at the time, I was so in my own head about the things I didn't know and the reasons that I shouldn't be in that job that I didn't even bother thinking about a simpler approach to the problem. Once I realized, hey, this financial model thing is actually something I'm totally capable of and it's pretty easy to do, I realized that was my imposter syndrome. I had just been swimming in this idea that I don't belong, and because of that, I couldn't see the forest for the trees. Now, just because I dealt with that imposter syndrome that one time and I kind of got over it in that situation, it doesn't mean that it went away. In fact, far from it. I deal with this all the time. In fact, every time I put out one of these videos, I have that feeling of being an imposter. But what I've learned to do, and what I would urge you to learn how to do, is to just acknowledge the feeling of something that comes up for you. I know that I have this thing, this imposter syndrome, and you may have the I don't have enough experience syndrome. Acknowledge that comes up, and also just let it be there, as opposed to it being reality and thinking, oh, because I feel this way, I can't take action, I can't apply for that job, I can't ask for that thing, I can't advocate for myself. In the next video of this series, I'm going to talk about how learning how to advocate for yourself is kind of like the antidote to all these feelings of inadequacy and imposter syndrome, etc. Once you learn how to really advocate for yourself and negotiate and ask for things that you want, you can really start to shed this more, and you can acknowledge that those feelings exist, but really move through it. Maybe it's just a job, jobs that you may not on paper fit. I'm just gonna keep, oh God, job requirements, and they say, oh, you need a MBA for this experience. I really hope you like this video about imposter syndrome and the I don't have it syndrome. I feel like this is a really, really important topic and something that I've struggled with, and I really, really hope that it's useful to you. If you like this video, let me know by hitting the like button, and of course, subscribe to my channel, offer me a comment or a question, let me know what else you'd like me to cover. I'm coming at you with a video each and every week, and I will see you in the next one.